time to get that daily news. I ain't watching TV, I'ma log on to YouTube. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Talking about that raw, uncut news. You a fool, you believe that mainstream and local news. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. And 411, keep the 411. On a sensitive subject, keep it 100, don't bite no tongue. If you cannot take the truth, then this is finna hurt. Who's to say if it's a round or a flat earth? Stick to the facts, what's some feelings? I don't do no capping. Read that paper, seen that news, now you know what happened. Playing a pretty picnic, but they control that weather. Same crisis actors, like we don't know no better. Thing about the truth always come to the light. Problem is too many, all bark, no bite. Like muscle, no might. I don't know what happened to them, but I know the way they said somebody ain't right. It's time to get that daily news. I ain't watching TV, I'ma log on to YouTube. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Talking about that raw, uncut news. You a fool, you believe that mainstream and local news. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe.
Oh, I'm gonna find it. Oh shit.
A tsunami advisory is now in effect for the entire U.S. West Coast and Alaska. This comes after an underwater volcanic eruption overnight in the South Pacific. Look at this video. Incredible satellite images showing a massive ash cloud and shock waves. The eruption happened near the island nation of Tonga. A tsunami, as you can see in this video, has already hit the largest island there, sending waves flooding into the capital, inundating the coastline.
Looked at what it's done in other countries and even other states, Hawaii, for example. So we kind of have an idea of what to expect with this particular system as the waves kind of make their way across the ocean. Again, here's what we're looking at, the tsunami threat. All these areas you see in yellow are under that tsunami advisory. It's about 14 million people. Now we're expecting about 1 to 2 feet of that increase of waves from the tsunami, the timing between 7:30 a.m. Pacific time time and 10 a.m. Pacific time. And it's a wide variety because that's a pretty big wide advisory when you talk about how many states are involved here. So it ranges anywhere from Homer, Alaska to expecting about 9:05 a.m. Alaska time, Monterey about 7:35 a.m. Pacific time. In fact, right now we've already started to see the very first wave begin to push into Monterey. Then we'll start in about 20 minutes or so, or up to around 7:50, a.m. Los Angeles, 8:10 around San Francisco. Those that are in Pacific times. Again, Hawaii also has a tsunami advisory out, but they've already seen some observed waves come through, not just one, but multiple of the islands, most of them ranging between the 1 to 3 foot range. That's very similar to what we are expecting along the west coast of the U.S., California, Washington, Oregon, and Alaska. I get it. 1 foot may not seem like it's that high, but it is enough if you were standing on the shoreline to wash you off, to wipe you off your feet and knock you down. Do not go surfing. Don't go stand at the shoreline and take selfies. It's just simply too dangerous. Now, 1 to 3 feet, while it is on the low end, it still can push a lot of water right there along the shoreline. This is the video that we've been showing from NOAA. Again, the satellite imagery. There you see the eruption itself. But around the edges here, what you can actually see are the shock waves that were created from the eruption itself. Here's a slower image of it. Again, there's the eruption. And then notice on the outer side, a lot of those shock waves reverberating out from it. This is actually from the lightning setup on that particular satellite there. Again, it just kind of gives you the slower motion to show you what it's been doing there again.
Yeah, we certainly hope so as we're watching this video of the shoreline getting inundated and the capital of Tonga getting flooded. You mentioned that this part of the world, is this the so-called Ring of Fire in the Pacific where volcanoes are constantly erupting, and just that this one is underwater?
Yeah, so the Ring of Fire is kind of it kind of sounds like all these volcanoes are kind of connected in some way, but it's more just like someone describing the shape of the volcanoes going around the Pacific, essentially where you have two tectonic plates interacting in various ways. Like, you know, if you especially have one tectonic plate going under the other, as you have here, it sets up a sort of chemical system that's very good for developing volcanoes that often have quite explosive activity. So yeah, this part of the world is known for being very volcanically active. It's always kind of volcanically active in some way. It's just that when a volcano does something particularly violent, especially if it's near people, we tend to pay more attention to it, sort of thing. So there's always some sort of volcanism happening in this part of the world. It just happens that this eruption at the moment is, you know, a particularly energetic one.
Science Media Center, that research indicates that when there is this kind of eruption episode, that it could last for weeks or months. It could potentially trigger other blasts. How do you feel about that assessment?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds, I mean, you know, that sounds perfectly reasonable to me. It's the sort of thing that is actually quite hard to pin down sometimes. I know your viewers will be probably familiar with the eruption that's happening in La Palma in the Canary Islands, and that began several months back, and it was unclear at the time, like, is this going to go on for weeks or for months? And actually one of the hardest questions in volcanology is how long will an eruption last? Because it's actually, you know, volcanologists getting much better at knowing when an eruption is probably going to start, more or less, but actually working out when it ends is really tricky because you can't really see how much magma is being supplied from like the really deep parts of the planet up to the deep parts of the crust up to the surface. So it's really hard to tell, but it's good to be cautious. And scientists generally say, you know, based on historical evidence of past eruptions, these things can go on for days, weeks, or months, sort of thing. But yeah, it's to be seen, really. It's kind of hard. It's much harder to pinpoint when an eruption is going to end relative to when it's probably going to begin.
An eruption of thick black ash spoiling the picture-perfect sea of blue. This just one in a series of explosions over the past 3 weeks on Hunga Tonga, the latest this morning.
We discovered this morning that the eruption is huge. It's 7 times bigger than the eruption earlier, late last year and earlier this month.
It's a particularly active area of volcanism in Tonga right now. So the ash that's generated along with that explosion usually rises to a few hundreds of meters to a few kilometers above surface, but not nearly as high as the steam that's ejected up to maybe 20 kilometers high.
60 kilometres away, residents in Tonga's capital could smell it.
And we advise them, yeah, that's the sulfur, that's a result of eruption, and that's normal.
Swirling tides were seen at the Nuku'alofa waterfront today, prompting a warning for residents to stay away.
We would not expect a tsunami to get any further than the very local regions around the islands.
Air New Zealand says it's continuing cargo and repatriation flights in and out of Tonga as normal, but will amend the flight schedule if it becomes unsafe to fly. The advice now to Tongan residents:
protect their rainwater harvesting, and also make sure they have to wear a mask. But the best thing to do is to stay indoors.
In the meantime, Tongan officials are working 24/7 to monitor further volcanic activity, which they say could last anywhere from weeks to months.
An underwater volcano erupted off the coast of Tonga early this morning, and it is triggering a tsunami warning for neighboring islands and even in areas as far away as our California coast. Tonga lies in the South Pacific Islands east of Australia. Take a look at the satellite imagery of the eruption as it was happening. The image shows a 3-mile wide plume of ash, steam, and gas rising into the air 12 miles high. We are hearing reports of violent waves hitting areas of Australia and New Zealand following this event. There are no immediate reports about injuries, though, or the extent of the damage, but communication with the nation is difficult since it is so small. About 105,000 people live in the nation of Tonga.
You know, this is not something that we, hear about every day. Tsunami advisories is not, again, something that we have issued very often. So let's get to the details. So yeah, we are monitoring conditions near the coastline. That advisory was issued earlier today. It's not in effect just for us in Southern California, but pretty much all across the West Coast. And what does this mean for us locally? Well, we could see waves 1 to 2 feet possible. That's going to start around 7:50 this morning, and it's going to last for the next few hours. Strong currents, hazardous to swimmers and boaters. That is, of course, also a concern, and some coastal flooding. But I do want to mention that areas under this advisory should not expect widespread inundation. This is something we will continue to monitor as we head into the next few hours, of course.